So let's look at the MIDI recording capabilities in Pro Tools. I'm going to create a new session here, have my dashboard up. We're just going to give it a name. So I'll just call it MIDI song. MIDI is an acronym, by the way. If you don't know, it stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And we have a bit depth of 24 and sample rate of 48K. We don't have to change those. If we're doing an audio recording on top of the MIDI, then that becomes important. But as we create these just straightforward MIDI information, it's not important. So I click on create, and we have our usual Pro Tools setup of mix window over here, edit window here, a transport bar, and transport up here. There's a few things I want to change before I start. And the first thing is, because I'm going to be recording MIDI, I want my display to be in bars and beats. So I'm going to change that first. So that is one bar, first part of bar one, and then that will be parts of the first beat of the first bar. Again, I'll come to that in a future video just so you can see exactly what all this actually means, because it becomes to be quite important when we are editing. The other thing I want to do is I want to open my MIDI controls. Now my MIDI controls are part of the transport bar, and at the moment they're not on the screen. To get MIDI controls, we can just, this is my toolbar at the top here, we can just select the toolbar and select the MIDI controls. And there they are. And the most important one probably is the count off. And the count off is just a 2-bar count in before we can start recording MIDI information once we've got tracks up and enabled. Okay. Another important one, yours might be off, by default it tends to be off, is this one here called MIDI merge. And that can be very important when we're doing a certain technique, when recording drum parts, for example. So sometimes I just turn that on and leave it on. On your floating transport bar here, again, we can turn on those same controls so that they're displayed here. If you turn one off there, then obviously it turns off on the same, because that's just a duplication of those elsewhere on the screen. The other thing we're going to do in the MIDI controls is I'm going to adjust the tempo. So I'm not going to use 120 beats per minute. I'm going to use 105 beats per minute for the song I'm thinking about just now, which is just a little bit groovier than 120. So I just double click on the 120. Then at the moment you see your tempo bar still says 120 until I hit enter, and then it will change to 105. So by double clicking here to change that, that's one way I can do it, but I can always double click on this little red triangle here as well, and we get the tempo change dialog up, and we can change there, or we can even go to event, tempo operations window, and there it is, and we can put it in there as well. Okay, so various different options for that. Now I'm going to create tracks. I'm going to use 4 tracks. So the types of track that we're going to create here are very important. We're going to create instrument tracks, not MIDI tracks. We'll talk about that very shortly. So I'm just going to bring up my track creation window here. So Shift Command N, and then I want 4 tracks. So typed in 4. Now I'm going to go for stereo tracks here. Most of the time when we're using keyboards and synthesizer sounds, we want stereo tracks. And there's a good reason sometimes for using mono tracks, but most of the time hit stereo. Audio tracks here is the default, okay, and we have all the different track types. There is a separate video all about track types in Pro Tools that's worthwhile taking the 5 minutes of that video just to have a look at, with an in-depth explanation about what all of these do. Now, because we're recording information, a lot of people think it's MIDI I want to select, but it's not. It's the instrument track, okay? An instrument track is a MIDI track, but it's going to trigger the internal instruments in Pro Tools, which is kind of what we want. It just keeps everything inside and keeps the world a much easier place. So I'm going to click on that, click create. And you see I now have 4 instrument tracks. Just as a wee tip here, if you need another instrument track, because an instrument track was that last type of track you created, and a stereo one at that, if you double click underneath the last track, it'll automatically create a new one. Okay, that's quite a useful little function to know. So first thing we're going to do, as with any recordings, we're going to name the tracks. I'm just going to give them very basic generic names just now. So my first track will be drums, then I'll click on next. My second track will be bass. Then I'll click on next, and I'll just use a piano for the 3rd track. And then I'll use a synth for the 4th track. Okay, 5th track we'll leave at the moment. Okay, so it's important as well that we have our inserts displayed, because this is where we insert the instruments. So If they're not displayed, we go to this little menu here, and this is just, it's called the Edit Window View Selector. It just customizes what we can see, and you see Inserts is selected there. I quite like having the Input-Output section open at the same time as well, so I'll go with that for today. Okay, so on our first track, our drum track, we need to insert an instrument, and we've got several drum instruments. Actually, on this computer, I've got an awful lot because I've got some additional plug-in instruments. But the one I'm going to use the bog standard Pro Tools ones that come out the box with Pro Tools Expand 2. And there's reasons I'm going to use this, and it'll come up in a second. And this is what the Expand 2 window looks like. Now, in order to trigger the sounds, I can't now just play my keyboard and hear the sounds. I have to have record enabled. And now I can get my sounds, which is lovely. That's not a drum sound though, obviously. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use loops. So somebody at Avid at Pro Tools has gone to the trouble of pre-programming loops that we can utilize for this. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to click here, and we see the whole menu of different banks of sounds that are available to us in Expand. So if I go to the first menu there, 0, then we get a massive list of all the different sounds that are available. Then I move down, for example, go to the hard leads one. That's a whole load of lead synthesizer sounds. So there are literally thousands of sounds in Expand. And you'd think again that we're going to go to drums, and I will do a separate menu, a separate video on how to record drums using that menu later on. But what I want to go to today, just for ease of use, is this 26, this bank 26, which is loops. And like I said, these are all loops that somebody else has created for us, so we don't even have to think about creating a drum loop because it's already there for us. For this project, I'll probably go for one of these pop hop ones. Try pop hop 090 plus. That's an indication of the tempo it was originally designed to be at. Now, with this in mind, all we have to play now is one note. If I play middle C, I get the groove. Okay. Now all I'm doing is holding down the note middle C. We'll change the pitch in that by changing the note that I play. Okay, but you notice the tempo stays the same. If I alter the tempo, let me just do that. I'll do it this way this time. Take it down to say 85 beats per minute. You'll notice that the groove also slows down. Okay. Actually, 105 might have been a wee bit too fast, so let me just change that to 95. See how that sounds. Yeah, we'll go with that for today. So to create my drum groove, all I'm going to do is hold down that note. But we can get, every time I play the note, you'll get that the first beat. Like that, you see, which is quite nice. Okay, so let's do that for a few bars, and then we'll put some other stuff over the top of it. So again, I'm going to get a count off of 2 bars. So click on record first, and then click on play. You'll hear the metronome for 2 bars. And actually, do you know what? I'm going to create an additional click track. So to do that, just click track from your track menu. So that will, there we go, and that just bobs away in the background as well. Okay, so I'll just shift that down. Just grab the nameplate of the track and just drag it down to the bottom so it's out of the way. So here we go, hold down record and then hit play. We'll get 2 bars counting, and then we'll start holding down the key for our drum part. 2, 3, 4. Another 4 bars. There we go. Just might as well go on for another 4 bars. There we go. So now hit the spacebar or stop, and you can see my drum part. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just holding down a note for that period of time. So we rewind to the beginning. Have a listen. Lovely. Okay, so that's my drum part recorded very simply without any problem whatsoever. We can close down expand now because we won't really need that. The other good thing is these drum loops, they're all played beautifully in time. We don't have to quantize them, although again, quantize is something we need to talk about. I played these pretty well in time, but we'll come to why quantize is important when we do the bass part, because I will probably not play the bass part as well as that. So let's look at the bass part now. So we record disable the drums and record enable the bass part, and now we need to insert an instrument for the bass. Now for the bass, we're going to use an instrument called vacuum. Again, I'm trying to show you as many of the instruments that you get with Pro Tools as possible. So here's a nice synthesizer here. So it doesn't sound that nice at the moment because it's not playing one of its bass sounds. We've got hundreds of sounds in the sound bank of vacuum. So again, if I click where it says factory default, I'm going to go for the bass menu, and I think, well, there's a Juno 106. That's always quite nice. There we go, we'll use that. Okay, it's just nice. Nice analog, quite fat bass sound. Okay, also with these ones, you can see the keyboard actually playing the notes that I'm playing as I play along with it, just to show you that it's actually working in real time. Okay, so again, we don't have to have that open whilst I'm playing it, we just need to have our countdown. So it's the second track that's highlighted. The drum's going to play at the same time as me playing the bass. So click on record, then click on play. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there's my bass part, and you can see it's kind of got that wee step format in it. I would just zoom in here using the zoom tools. Did I play it well in time? Well, there's a couple of things going on there. Okay, if we zoom into this here, I'll just make this a little bit larger so you can see it. See that little note there? Now that's a wee drag that I did. And this is why sometimes it's not great to quantize things, because if I quantize, then it's going to time correct that, and that will basically become two notes on top of each other, which is a bit of a shame. Also, at the moment, the quantize value I've got selected is, well, the nudge value, you can see the grid value is a crotchet. I'm going to change that to semi-quaver, which is better. But again, you'll see that all of these notes, I'm playing them a little bit at a time, so they're not absolutely bang on the beat. So, well, I'll quantize it, and you can see what happens when I quantize it. So to quantize a part, it needs to be highlighted. So using the grabber tool, sorry, I'll just make the smart tool active there. So using the grabber tool, we have highlighted the entire bass part. Again, if I zoom out, you'll see that. That's the whole bass part there. And what I'm going to do is quantize it. So quantization is an event operation. Okay, so go to the event menu, select event operations, and select quantize. It has a keyboard shortcut of Alt Option and 0, which I'll use the next time I go to quantize. Now this is going to quantize to a 16th note. So it'll move every note here that you can see to absolutely on one of these lines. Okay, now quantize is great up to a point, and you'll see what happens when I do this. So click and apply, bush. Okay, so that's going to sound boom, 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 dubba dum dum, rather than being a nice wee drag. Okay, so let's have a listen to that. We'll just solo it up and play it back. In fact, the note was so short it didn't. Okay, now one of the reasons we're not getting the attack is because I've overlapped a lot of my notes. I'm playing beautifully legato. Let's just quickly edit that. I'll show you how to do that. So, close the quantize window, and we're just going to double click on the part this time to get the MIDI operations window up. So here's all the MIDI events that you can see. So each one of these is a note. Oopsie. Okay, let's just undo that. And as you can see, all the notes here, we'll just zoom in slightly like that. Okay, now some of these were overlapping, so we weren't getting the proper attack. Now see, there's a note there. That's my wee drag note that's just been quantized to be at the same time as the note after it. So I'm just going to erase that. This note here, for example, the two go overlap each other. So what I'm going to do is just make this one shorter. And by making that shorter and this one shorter, I should get the original attack on the next note along. Again, that one there, just played it to be a little bit long. That note there just needs to be erased. That's my little drags. This is another way you can erase out mistakes and things as well. So if you've played a mistake or a wrong note or two notes at once, you can actually fix it. So there's my groovy wee bass part. We can close that down now. Okay, so this is what we're looking at now. So bass and drums together sound like this. What's happened here? There we go. So we've got a nice wee sort of feel groove going there. So I'm going to go for a piano sound now here. I'll just make this smaller. We'll just make that, take that back to medium. Okay, so I'm just playing with the track sizes there by clicking on the track ruler. So the piano part here, again, we can click and record enable. And this time I'm going to use an instrument called the Mini Grand. Again, this is one that you get out of the box with Pro Tools. Quite a versatile piano sound. It is just a piano though, it's just like an acoustic piano. So again, we can either play it by clicking here, or we can play the actual keyboard and you see the notes that I'm playing as they come along, as they're displayed. So we're ready to do this next wee groovy bit. So let's do it. Again, we'll hear the bass and we'll hear the drums happening at the same time. Here we go. 2, 3, 4. And then you make a horrendous mistake like that. So we'll just grab that again, and I'll just something like that. Okay, it's always good if you actually play the right notes, isn't it? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, pretty dreadful keyboard playing going on there, but again, we could go into this and we could edit out all my mistakes, which would be pretty wonderful. Okay, oopsie daisies. So what I did there, everything was highlighted, so we want to highlight that single note to get rid of it. And these ones here as well. I think my fingers are just too fat for the keyboard. That's what I always told my piano teacher at music college. And yes, I did go to music college. You do wonder sometimes. Again, we can quantize this, so we'll just come out of there and we'll highlight that, and we will just go event. Oh, I'll show you the shortcut this time actually. So hold down option and select 0, and the quantize menu comes up. Click and apply, and now we can have a listen to the Okay, there's a little note in there. It's just happened a little bit too early. I didn't catch it before. There it is there. Again, if we want to move a note in this editor, we just click it and move it left to right so it's in the right place. Okay, that one there could be a little bit longer as well. Okay, we could actually make all of those the same length, make them all a semiquaver like that. Okay, so very quick editing. Okay, now another great thing about MIDI is we can just copy stuff wherever we want it. So if I wanted that to happen again in the next 4 bars, we can do a couple of things. The easiest thing to do is hit Command and D for duplicate, and you see we get a second copy of it on top of itself. We can do exactly the same with the bass part, but another quick way of doing this is by holding down the Option or Alt key and then clicking and dragging it to where you want it to go, like that. Okay, now we have to have there's a wee bit of a beware there, and I have to do that. I did that on purpose. So honest, if you grow right into this, you will notice that there's a space between those two parts, and that's not good because that means that the bass part will start playing after it, and that's because I'm in slip mode and not in grid mode. So I'm just going to change to grid mode, and it will automatically go to the beginning of the next bar. So like I said, if we want to duplicate that 4 bars, we can hit Command D to duplicate, or if we want to duplicate 4 bars using a click and drag function, we hold down Option and click and drag to where we want it to copy to. So we've now got 16 bars of my wee groove. Okay, you start to get the idea. Now, the other thing we can do is, whilst we copied from left to right to extend things, we can also copy up and down. So if I take this information, once again, hold down Option and click and drag that onto another track, that will now trigger whatever sounds we have assigned here. Now, I haven't assigned any sounds onto this synth track yet, so we'll just do that. And this time I'm going to use expand again, like this. So it's the same one I used for the drums, but remembering this has got a whole wealth of synthesizer parts on this as well. So we're just going to go into this, and I'm going to select, what was I going to select? Synth horns, where was it now? Synth brass, and then go classic synth horns. There we go, that's the track I wanted. So now I'll get a duplication of the piano part using a synth horn sound. Still a couple of wrong notes in there, we can sort that out later. But you see how simple it is to build up an arrangement like this, because we could take the piano out of there. Another thing we can do, of course, is we can use the edit tools. If I decide that I want the bass part to stop there, if I now hit Command E for edit, I've now got 4 bars of bass instead of 8 bars of bass. So I could take the bass out at that point there. So we're getting an arrangement happening here. I'll just copy this over whilst it's still playing. So, piano, no drums. Yeah, got some chords to sort out there, but never mind. You get the idea, okay? It's a little bit messy. But the other thing, of course, we can do is we can say, well, okay, 95. I said 105 at the beginning. Let's speed it all up. And by speeding it up, it doesn't change the pitch. Okay, so we can speed things up without changing the pitch. We can slow it right down as well, make it even more groovy. So that's the basics of creating MIDI information and a little bit of basic editing of MIDI in Pro Tools, and hopefully you'll start to see how simple it is.